Good morning, everyone. Just had to check to be sure it was still morning. It's already felt like a long day. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our virtual roundtable. My name is Sarah McInnes, and I'm a partner at McInnes Cooper, and I practice in the area of immigration law, and we do specialize in business immigration. And I'll be presenting today with my colleague, Elizabeth.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Salami. I'm an immigration lawyer at the Halifax office of McInnes Cooper. I work directly with Sarah McInnes. The same type of, work that Sarah does I help employers looking to bring their foreign workers into Canada. I'm so glad to be here today to talk about the tactics you can look at when you're seeking to expedite the entry of your foreign workers into Canada.
So we will get started. So we've decided to discuss today 5 tactics to help employers expedite the entry of foreign workers. We know that increasingly so, a lot of employers are relying on foreign workers, and one of the ever-standing most significant barriers is delay in getting those foreign workers into the country. And so that's what we're always trying to help our clients with. So if you are a Canadian organization that is relying on accessing foreign talent to staff your Canadian operations, either on a very temporary or a more permanent basis, we do assist equally with both. There are a few different pools or populations from which you might draw from. So particularly if you are a Canadian organization that has either affiliated companies, branch companies, parent companies outside of Canada, you will have access to these 3 different pools of populations. So one is existing foreign employees. So if you are a foreign company and you have established a Canadian presence, one of the first places that you're going to look to staff your Canadian operations is bringing your existing foreign employees to your Canadian operations. So this is people who are already familiar with your organization and have the skill, they have the skills that you will need. And so that is a group of people with which we help employers bring into the country. The second place that the second group of people that you may draw from for staffing your Canadian organization may be new foreign employees. So this is a group of people for which you have scouted a particular skill set outside of the country that a foreign national possesses that you would need or like to have in your Canadian organization. And obviously, if they're outside the country, then they need to go through some sort of immigration process to get into Canada. So that's a group of people that we help employers with as well. And then finally, of course, you'll draw from the Canadian population to source for your Canadian organization, for which you do not need our assistance.
Okay, so we feel before delving into the tactics today, we should talk about some of those terminologies that you probably will come across when in the work permit application process in Canada. So for every foreign worker who is not a foreign national, who is not a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident of Canada, who is seeking to work in Canada, they would require a work permit, or what is called in some countries as a work visa. allowing them to work. Working in Canada without the proper authorization is actually a breach of Canada's immigration rules. And depending on the country where they are from, if they are from a visa requiring country, they will require also an entry visa to allow them to come into the country. Or if they are not from a visa requiring country, that's if they are from a visa exempt country, they will require an electronic travel authorization. What usually happens during the work permit application process is that after the work permit is approved, at the same time, the entry visa is the foreign national is asked to send their passport in, and the entry visa is issued. So the entry visa is like a travel document because the work permit is not a travel document. The entry visa allows them to come into Canada, and it's usually, valid for multiple entries. They can come in and go as much as they like, so long as their entry visa is valid. And they can also, allows them, as long as their work permit is also valid during the time, they'll also be able to maintain their worker status in Canada. For those that from visa exempt countries, those that don't require a visa, such as countries such as in Europe, for example, they would need an electronic visa travel authorization. So that is also issued at the same time as the work permit is issued. It is usually linked to their passport, so they don't need a visa to travel, but there's an authorization allowing them to travel to Canada. It is usually valid for 5 years or until their passport expires, whichever comes first. So along with the work permit and the visa, the foreign worker can then be able to work in Canada. However, I think it's very important for you as an employer to understand the concept of work in Canada. So under Canada's immigration rules, work is defined as an activity that you pay. You pay your foreign. Any activity that you pay wages or commissions for. But it's also important to understand that any activity, even though you're not paying someone for, any activity that directly competes with the interests of Canadians and permanent residents will also qualify as work. So take, for example, you have a foreign national that you're not paying that is volunteering with your organization, and in the position that they are volunteering in, Canadians or permanent residents would normally be paid. It is an activity that competes with the interests of Canadians and permanent residents and actually takes away from the opportunities that they will normally be entitled to. So that will be considered as work. So it is very important as employers to understand that concept, that even though you may think they are volunteering with you, they don't need to be paid. It's still considered as work, and they will need the proper authorization to be able to work. Now, there are two classes of work permits, and for situations like yours where you probably want to support your foreign worker into Canada, you'll be given what is called an employer-specific work permit for the foreign worker to work with you. That limits them in the sense that they cannot. They can only work with you for the time when their work permit is authorized, and also it limits them to a particular location to work. And there's an open work permit as well, but we'd consider that later. And so one of the things, another thing in the work permit application, regime in Canada that you may want to know about is, how do you get a work permit? What are the ways to get a work permit in Canada? So basically, there are two ways for a person to have the proper work authorization to work in Canada, and that's the temporary foreign worker route. And the second one is the international mobility program. The temporary foreign worker program allows Canadian employers to be able to fill shortages within their labor force that they have identified that they are not available Canadians or permanent residents to fill for them. And I think it's no longer news that Canada's employers are saying there are no skilled talent to be able to fill some of the positions they're looking to hire. Even in the Atlantic region, there are employers that are saying that they don't have the required talents that they need to be able to fill the shortages within their labor force. So the temporary foreign worker program is a viable program that such employers can use to be able to fill those talents. However, in order to do so, they will need to they'll need something called the Labor Market Impact Assessment, which is the LMIA. So the LMIA essentially is saying that the hiring the foreign worker would not have any would not have a negative impact on the Canadian labor market. And how that process looks like is that the employer is required to advertise the position that they're looking to hire for a period of 4 weeks. There are strict advertising requirements for them to advertise, and thereafter they have to complete an LMIA form, which sets out, the details about the job, the working conditions, the kind of wage they are looking to pay, which must meet the prevailing wage for the particular job they are looking to hire for. It contains all of this information, which is then submitted to the government. After the government completes its review to see if there will be any impact to the Canadian labor market in terms of, is it a positive one, or we have a neutral impact on the Canadian labor market. After it is approved, the employer would then use that LMIA approval letter, give that to the foreign worker, and they can then use that to apply for their work permit, support their work permit application. The second one is the International Mobility Program. This is an LMIA exempt process, and the notion of the International Mobility Program is that work permits are issued to foreign workers on the basis that having them serve some benefits, cultural, economic benefits to Canada, on the basis that, Canadians enjoy similar benefits outside of Canada. And so you find, such work permit being issued on the basis of international agreement, trade agreements that Canada has with foreign countries. There are so many international trade and mobility agreements that Canada has. For example, the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement, the COSMA. Pursuant to that agreement, there are certain categories of professionals in certain occupations that can come into Canada, have their work permits issued as an IMP work permits without the need to have an LMIA, go through the LMIA process. And also as well, work permits, for example, postgraduate work permits issued to students who have completed their post-secondary education in Canada as well, such types of work permits issued pursuant to the International Mobility Program. Again, it's an LMIA exempt program. You don't have to go through the rigors of going through the LMIA, and so it may be something that is considerable for you. And so when you're looking to have your foreign worker in Canada, after going through all the process, you have identified your foreign worker, you're looking to have them get started for you. Unfortunately, you still have to deal with the IRCC. And right now, the key challenge is the backlogs with immigration applications. And it cuts across, on the screen is represented the IRCC inventory. I think it's at February 2024, which is pretty recent. It shows right now they have about 2.1 million applications in queue. Out of them, there are about for temporary residence applications, which would include work permits, they have about 1.2 million. And out of the 1.2 million, there are about 700,000, processed within the service standard. And out of, with more than, I'll say 500,000 still within the backlog. So even if you have identified your foreign worker and they're able to work with you, you have them already set up, they still have to go through the process of applying for a work permit from outside. And so backlogs can cause a delay in them, being able to work for you at the time you need them to work for you in your organization. So the purpose of our call today, the purpose of our webinar today is to help you as an employer look at the tricks or the tactics you can use to expedite the entry of your foreign workers into Canada.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So the first tip that we want to provide today is to have an immigration strategy. And it has to be flexible. And the reason it has to be flexible is because the immigration rules are constantly changing and evolving. And so it can be difficult to plan too far in advance because something in your plan could change. So it is important to have a strategy, but it does need to be flexible. And it is important to think about your foreign workers proactively so that there is a planning process in place. And so part of that strategy, there's some things you can incorporate in that strategy to make it more effective. So number one is to make sure that before you explore the foreign worker route is that you've really assessed the Canadian talent available in the marketplace. So this is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, many immigration programs and work permit routes require you to demonstrate that you have assessed the Canadian marketplace first before being able to access foreign talent. So it's a good step to make sure you do thoroughly before you start thinking about hiring a foreign worker. And number two, it's honestly just easier and more efficient than trying to bring a foreign worker into the country in most cases. Number two, to understand the immigration rules and timelines. So, you don't need to be an expert in immigration law, but it is a really good idea to have a general sense of immigration rules, how long it's going to take to bring foreign workers in, what it's going to cost, what it's going to involve once they arrive in Canada, settlement, that kind of thing. So it's important to have an understanding of these immigration rules. Otherwise, you simply won't be able to, to plan a strategy from the get-go, and to use new or short-term immigration programs. So the government is continuously introducing new immigration programs that respond to Canada's current labor climate. Sometimes the government is slower to keep up with the changes that employers are actually experiencing in the market, but the government does try to evolve the immigration programs to reflect the needs of employers. So, and typically these newer programs are more efficient than older programs, so they're good to be aware of. And there are lots of short-term immigration programs. Sometimes you need someone to come in on a short-term basis, or at least to come in a short-term basis until you figure out a longer-term solution. And so those are, again, often more efficient programs to use when accessing foreign talent.
All right. Another tactic that you can think of using is moving key existing foreign employees to Canada. And so that will be through the route of the entire company transferee work permit. And so how that works is that if you are a Canadian business and you're affiliated to a foreign company overseas, maybe they are your affiliate, a subsidiary, or a parent company, and you already have a foreign employee that is already, working with them, you can think of moving them into Canada to work for you. This is an LMI, based on an LMI exempt process, is through the International Mobility Program. And so you don't have to go through the process, of going through the LMI route. And already, there is the advantage that those kind of employees already are aware of your corporate culture. So also in terms of just generally, the onboarding process is probably much more streamlined as opposed to where you're hiring somebody new who is not already aware of your corporate culture. So this is a viable route that you can think of using. Moving your existing foreign employees into Canada under the inter company transfer route. And how this works out, like I said, it has to be that they are affiliated to your company, like your Canadian company, either as a parent, a subsidiary, a branch, or an affiliate overseas. And there is a qualifying relationship. So you need to be able to show that there's a qualifying relationship between your company and the company overseas. They want to see, for example, where you're applying. For example, they want to see a corporate organizational chart that shows the relationship between both companies, probably a shareholders register that shows the interest, that shows the Canadian interest and the foreign interest as well, that will be represented in the form of a documentation. You will need to be able to show that properly with the application for the work permit to justify the intra-company transfer work permits application, and also the relationship between the foreign company and the Canadian company has to be legitimate and ongoing. There has to be a continuous one. Both companies have to be in active business in the sense that they're a going concern. They are still offering businesses. They are still in, offering their service or some product, and that is still continuing as at the time the work permit application was submitted. And it has to be that the foreign national that you're seeking to bring into Canada, the foreign national that you're seeking to bring into Canada under this route, is in a position, is transferring to Canada in a position that is an executive or management role. For example, they're managing a function or units within the foreign company, and they are transferring to Canada in a similar role, or they have some, training. They have some capability over staffing. For example, they have the capacity to hire and fire, for example, or they can train, members of the function or the units that they manage. It has to be that they are transferring to Canada in the same capacity, or they are transferring to Canada in a specialized knowledge capacity. So this is probably much more difficult to prove in the sense that you have to be able to show that the foreign worker that you're looking to bring into Canada has some uncommon knowledge of the products or services that you're seeking to that your company offers. And it is absolutely I won't say absolutely, but it is not possible to have someone that has the same kind of knowledge that they do have within a short time. So that's probably much more difficult to prove. But those are, those capacities, senior, they're transferring in an executive, senior managerial, or specialized knowledge capacities are the positions that you can seek to bring those kind of foreign employees in under this route as intercompany transferees. And it has to be one of the key requirements for this route is that they are transferring from outside, from the foreign company to Canada in a similar position. They must have worked with the foreign employer for at least 1 year within the last 3 years before they put the application for a work permit. Again, this is an LMIA exempt work permit route, and so you don't have to go through the process of seeking an LMIA before you bring workers in through this route. And so what we have seen as a major challenge with this route is there's a high risk of refusal, especially for those companies that are looking to, they're already high established overseas and they're looking to start up here, start up their business, launch a product or a service here in Canada. The view, and probably because of abuse, by shady individuals, the view is that they're looking to take advantage of the ICT route to bring themselves into Canada without having a legitimate business, for legitimate business or legitimate reason for for the work permit. And so this represents a challenge. We see this quite often. The way to get around this challenge, though, is to make sure that you have established your Canadian business. If you require licenses, get the company registered. If it's the case that you require licenses for the business, for the product or the service you're offering, make sure you have that already in place for your business to show that it's a legitimate and active concern. Make sure you obtain space. We've seen cases for these types of work permits, for example, where RCC has come back to say they want the Canadian business that is seeking an ICT work permit to show that they have a space, that they have hired staff, for example. So we always advise that you have a space, hired already, leased out already for your business to operate, to show that you do have a legitimate business to run, and you're not just seeking to take advantage of the ICT route to get your foreign worker into Canada. Also, we ask that you hire staff before applying. It just shows that it's much more legitimate and you're able to pay your staff where you already have them in place before making the application. It shows a much more credible offering of your business where you have these things in place. And finally is the fact that we always advise that you have a business plan, submit that with the application, showing what the kind of business you're seeking to do in Canada, your projections in terms of financial projections for a period of 5 years at least. We always ask that you have, it's always advisable that you have this business plan, professionally done, crafted for you before you submit your application, just to show, because it shows a much more solid application that you have in place as opposed to just submitting this application without them. So yeah, high risk of refusal, especially for countries that they have a high visa refusal rate, but there's a way to go around this challenge. Another tactic that you can look at is to hire from visa exempt countries. As I stated before, there are certain countries that don't require visas to come into Canada, based on probably mobility agreement that Canada has with these countries. And so you should look to hiring from these countries in the sense that they don't have to go through the formal work permit application process. They can just, your foreign worker can just, travel to the border. Travel to the border. If they are from the US, or fly down to the border and apply for their work permit. So there's no formal application process. You don't have to complete forms as you would have, for those that are applying from visa requiring countries, for example. So it is an instant processing at that time, and so it saves you time and you can enter Canada if approved. Like I said, it's immediate processing. There's less. It doesn't mean that there's less scrutiny, but of course, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't show that they qualify for the type of work permit that they're applying for. They do have to qualify. They have to show that they qualify. But the opportunity that the visa, whoever is reviewing the application, is before them and can ask them questions if they have any questions about the application, also helps as opposed to submitting a paper application. So you can look at this, it is an option to consider when you're seeking to bring your foreign worker in quickly. Sarah.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So our fourth tip is to focus on expedited immigration processing streams. As I mentioned, the government does introduce new programs to be more efficient when reflecting sort of more urgent employer needs. And so it's very useful to access these programs when you can. One example of such program is the Global Skills Strategy. This strategy is a few years old now, but it was introduced in order to attract and retain more technology talent, technology-related positions to Canada. And so there are two ways that you can implement the Global Skills Strategy. One is an LMIA exempt route, and the other is through the Global Talent Stream LMIA. So the LMIA exempt route, this is really for very short-term entries into the Canadian labor market. So this can be very useful for a lot of employers who need people to come in on a contract or project basis, or just to address very short-term work needs. Or it may be someone who is working remotely but needs to come to Canada once in a while to provide services. So there is a 15 and 30-day work permit exemption available for high-skilled positions. And so if someone is coming in for 2 weeks, they can access the 15-day work permit exemption. They can access this 2 times a year, once every 6 months. There's also a 30-day work permit if someone's just coming to Canada once a year for 1 month. So if you are bringing in a worker that does require a visa and they need to apply for their work permit online, this work permit exemption will be processed very quickly within 2 weeks. And then the Global Talent Stream LMIA is an extremely useful tool that we have accessed for a lot of employers. And it is a type of LMIA, but it is much less burdensome than the normal type of LMIA. So I'll talk about those advantages. There are two types of Global Talent Stream LMIA. One is if you are a Canadian organization and you need to bring in an individual that has a very unique and specialized skill set that is, known to be in low supply in Canada. So as long as you can justify that your organization needs this skill set and the individual that you're bringing in has this unique and specialized skill set, then you can use this category A. Category B, there is a global talent occupations list that has designated occupations. So if you are hiring someone within those occupations and they are mainly technology related positions, then you can access the GTS LMIA as well under category B. So there are really significant advantages of the GTS LMIA. One is efficient processing. So a normal LMIA will take 2, maybe 3 months to process. A Global Talent Stream LMIA is going to be processed in 10 days. And then the corresponding work permit that the foreign worker needs to enter the country is also going to be processed in 2 weeks. So it's a much faster process than the normal LMIA and work permit route. You can apply for 3-year work permits under this category. And most significantly is that as an employer, you do not need to first recruit domestically. You don't need to show that you've tried to find a Canadian or permanent residence first before accessing this foreign talent. The government has acknowledged that these specific skill sets are in short supply, and so you can skip that recruitment process. So Elizabeth had touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is another international mobility program. So it's an LMIA exempt program. Another way to skip the burdensome LMIA process and get foreign workers here faster and more efficiently. So if you are hiring from a country that does have a free trade agreement with Canada, and there are many, then labor mobility will be spelled out in these agreements, and there's a lot of flexibility in these free trade agreements to bring foreign workers in from these specific countries much quicker. So typically, most of the free trade agreements are quite similar. So they allow for certain professionals to come in, certain skill sets, as well as intercompany transferees. And some of the free trade agreements do have some flexibility with bringing intercompany transferees, as well as CETA and the UK-Canada agreement allow for independent professionals, contractual service providers. So if you're bringing people in just on a contractual basis, or if they're coming under contract with a foreign company that you have contracted with, then there is labor mobility. So these agreements we try to access whenever we can because they are much more efficient than the normal immigration routes. And number 5 is to spotlight international students. So there is a huge pool of foreign talent already in Canada, which is, if you're going to hire a foreign worker, is a much faster way of getting them into your organization than going through the process of bringing someone into the country. And so generally, I'll go to this slide first. Generally, students who graduate from a university or a college in Canada, provided that it's a designated institution, they will be eligible to apply for an open work permit upon graduation. It can be a pretty lengthy work permit. So if a student is coming for a 4-year program, they will be eligible for a 3-year open work permit. They can work anywhere in Canada for any employer. And as the employer hiring them, you don't need to go through any sort of immigration process to hire them. And then there are certain programs, such as the Atlantic Immigration Program, that facilitate employers being able to hire foreign workers. So the AIP, for example, it's obviously a program that can only be accessed in the Atlantic provinces. Typically, employers hiring a foreign national under this program, the employee that they're hiring needs to have previous related job experience to the job for which you're hiring them. But for international grads, if they've gone to an Atlantic Canadian university, they don't need any previous work experience. So if you hire them and you want to keep them on and you want to support their permanent residence journey, then you can begin that process right away with them. And that brings us abruptly to the end of the presentation. So those are a few tips and tricks that we have for helping you expedite the entry of your foreign workers. We are very happy to take any questions that you may have. And maybe I'll start. There were some questions submitted in advance. One of those questions was about something that we didn't cover, but which is something, an issue that employers commonly come across. And that is employers who are bringing in people to the country as business visitors. So the question was, what are common mistakes that employers make when trying to bring in business visitors to the country? And sometimes employers will experience that they will get held up at the border. So the common mistakes that we see, there are 3 that I thought of. Number 1 is understanding the correct definition of business visitor. What is a business visitor? Who qualifies? And this is something that's really commonly misunderstood, not only with employers, but also with Canada Border Services agents. It's quite a ambiguous definition, and it's honestly sometimes difficult to know whether someone qualifies as a business visitor or not. So that's what we see commonly is a misunderstanding of what a business visitor is. A business visitor is not accessing the Canadian labor market at all. It does not matter whether your business visitor is coming in for 6 months or for 1 hour. The length of time that they are coming in the country has no impact on their status. What matters is the activities that they'll be doing once they're in Canada, and whether, if they were not coming in the country, whether a Canadian would otherwise be doing that work. Again, even if it's 1 hour of work that they're needed to come in for. So it's really commonly misunderstood definition. And then number 2, once you understand that business visitor, and if you know that the person coming in definitely falls within the business visitor definition, the second mistake that we see is communicating that to a CBSA officer. So again, the definition, it can be misunderstood as well by CBSA officers. So if you're not able to articulate how you qualify as a business visitor, this can lead to you getting held up at the border. And so I guess quite simply, if someone comes in and uses the word work or working, then this is a red flag for a CBSA officer that a work permit might be required, and that you're not coming in as a business visitor. So correct communication language when you're encountering a CBSA officer and explaining the purpose of your entry, can lead to mistakes. And number 3 is incomplete documentation. So you really need to be prepared to demonstrate to a CBSA officer what you're doing in the country and why and for how long. And if you don't have documentation that reflects that, then you're going to have trouble at the border. So yeah, so those are the three of the things that I see. There's also a very common misconception that if you are a Canadian organization and you have a contract with a foreign company, and as part of that service contract, the foreign company has to send an employee in to perform some sort of service. There's a common misconception that because you're not hiring that employee and you're not paying that employee, that therefore a work permit is not required. And that is incorrect. A work permit is required because indirectly there is someone that is making an entry into the Canadian labor market. So that is an instance where if that person was not coming to perform those services, a Canadian citizen or permanent resident potentially would be. So in those contractual relationships between Canadian employer and foreign company, a work permit is required if services are being provided. So that's a very common misconception. And yeah, I could talk more about business visitors if there are questions, but I do see one question in the chat. The question is, given the recent shifts in immigration regulations and practices, I'm curious about the anticipated developments over the next 18 months, as are we. Do you foresee further changes in immigration policies during this period? That's an excellent question, because there has been really significant changes announced very recently. And so for those who may not have heard, for me, I guess there's 2 really significant changes that stand out that I think will have a really big impact. One is with respect to international students and limiting their entry, imposing quotas, and also limiting the entry of those students' spouses. So international students, I mean, we talked about it as a tip and trick. A lot of employers rely on international students for their workforce because they are here in the country. There's a lot of talent. They can work during the school year. They can work full time during their holiday breaks. They graduate with an open work permit, and up until now, they've also brought their spouses with them who come on open work permits. There's a lot of foreign talent through international students that's been injected into the Canadian labor market. And with the recent quotas, that is going to decrease. So I think that's going to be significant. And, you hope that the government knows what they're doing with that, because it's a lot of labor that employers are going to be missing out on now. And I think that's going to be felt. The second really significant development is limiting temporary residence. So these are people who are coming in through the ways we discussed. So through LMIAs, through LMIA exemptions, and the government is limiting that quota. And employers rely on this foreign labor. So in order to bring someone into the country to work, as we discussed, you generally do have to show that there is a gap in the Canadian labor market that you cannot fill. And so if the government is going to limit employers' access to be able to bring in a foreign worker when they can't when they can't find this skill set in the Canadian labor market, that's going to be significant. So again, I just, you hope that the government has thought through the long-term impacts of this. That's a long intro to the question, which was, do you foresee further changes? I don't know if I do. I think those changes are so significant that the government really does have to wait and see how those play out before making any further changes. I think it'd be very dangerous to implement more, and the changes, we're all seeing the same trend, and that's limiting the numbers, the entries of foreign workers. So I don't think there can be any more changes to limit foreign workers. This is enough. So I do hope, and I do foresee that the government will wait to see how these two really significant changes play out before introducing more. Elizabeth, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I also agree that the recent changes have, had more impact on, foreign workers, and I don't particularly foresee that there will be any more, changes that have, as such impact on foreign workers as the recent changes that have been announced by the government. That is not to say, however, that they are not constantly changes, with immigration policies by the government. I think the important thing for us, even as lawyers, is to always, make sure that, also as employers, is to be flexible with whatever immigration policies come in, and to have, probably alternatives. Keep yourselves updated, as you have, it appears that as you have done, as to how those changes will affect you. I don't foresee, just like Sarah said, any more changes to the that would affect foreign workers as announced by the government in the recent ones. But again, it is the government, and immigration policies are always constantly changing. So it's probably better to have a flexible approach to how you you devise your strategies to be able to make yourself not be too caught up when those changes take place. So yeah.
I think the only thing that as I think about it more, it's a question that does get you thinking, that the only thing I can foresee is that because of these quotas, certain industries are going to be hit harder than others. And so as long as there are, united movements by certain industries, the government will respond to those. And so if some industries are really hit by these quotas, for example, the agricultural industry really relies on foreign workers, service industries. If there is a real negative impact and those industries are able to come together and advocate, the government does respond to employers' needs and requests as they come up. So if there's a sense that these new policies are going to hit certain industries too hard, then the government will evolve its policies to adapt to employers' needs, I believe. Not guaranteed. I hope that answers the question. I don't see any more. We did have a few questions based on asking about investment streams into the Canadian market. These are really challenging. So there are no passive investment ways into Canada anymore, and for some time there is opportunity for entrepreneurs to come into the country and either take over existing Canadian businesses or start their own. They do require two things: both significant investment into the business, but they also require that you yourself as the entrepreneur is a necessary asset to that company. So you do need to be in Canada and responsible for the day-to-day operations. There is no connection simply between investing in a company and being able to gain status in Canada. You do need to be, you as the individual, a critical part of operating that company. And so most provinces have some sort of provincial stream that allows for entrepreneurs to come into the country, provided that they are coming in to also work. I think no other questions. So yeah, that's it from us. We are so happy to respond to calls or emails after the presentation if you have questions that come up. And yeah, we're happy to hear from you and to chat with you about any of your potential immigration needs for your workforce. And thank you so much again for coming. I know it's a long weekend coming up, and we are certainly looking forward to it. So I wish everyone a very nice long weekend. Hope everyone is able to take it, and thank you so much for coming.